The room was alive with tension. A grand hall in Geneva hosted the International Justice Summit, broadcast live across the globe. Politicians, legal experts, activists, and journalists filled the venue, each one tuned into the high-stakes conversation about global justice and international accountability. On stage sat a panel of well-known figures, including Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General turned conservative media personality, who now styled herself as a crusader for justice and law and order on the world stage. As the moderator introduced the next speaker, a wave of whispers swept through the crowd. To everyone's surprise, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the transitional president of Burkina Faso, stood up from the audience. Until now, he had been an unannounced attendee. Traoré was young, composed, and carried himself with a revolutionary's quiet intensity. Dressed in a modest, traditional Burkinabe tunic, he approached the podium and requested a brief segment to clarify some crucial truths. The moderator, caught off guard but intrigued, nodded. Cameras turned to Traoré. All eyes, and millions of viewers around the world, watched as he began to speak. Justice, he said calmly, is not justice when it is wielded like a weapon against the weak by those who believe themselves untouchable. There was a pause, then he continued. My people have been robbed, not just of resources, but of dignity. And the mechanisms of this robbery are not always through soldiers or mercenaries. Sometimes, it is done through suits, contracts, and lobbying. Sometimes, it is done by people who sit here with us today. He turned slightly, gesturing to the panel beside him. His eyes landed directly on Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida, now an advisor and advocate for powerful Western interests. I come with receipts. He held up a folder, and on the massive digital screen behind him, scanned copies of documents began to appear. Legal contracts, internal emails, communications from lobbying firms. Pam Bondi's name was highlighted again and again. Payments, meeting notes, agendas detailing how certain African governments, including Burkina Faso, were to be pressured into signing away mining rights and economic control in exchange for development assistance and legal support. There were audible gasps from the audience. Some journalists immediately stood up and began snapping photos of the screen. Bondi looked stunned. Her hand hovered over her lapel mic as if unsure whether to speak or rip it off entirely. Traoré didn't flinch. He stepped aside and let the evidence scroll by in silence. These are not allegations, he said. These are facts, verified by independent journalists. Today, I do not speak only for my country. I speak for all nations who have been told they are free, only to learn they are leased property under Western contracts. Bondi's face flushed with color. Her lips tightened, but she remained silent, for now. The moderator, clearly unsettled, tried to transition. We will allow Ms. Bondi a chance to respond shortly. But the damage had been done. On social media, hashtags were exploding. Hashtag Traoré leaks. Hashtag exposed live. And somewhere in the blur of flashing cameras and panicked whispers, a shift had taken place. Something that could not be undone. Pam Bondi sat frozen in her seat, the lights from the television cameras casting an unforgiving glare across her face. Her lips parted slightly as if she were about to speak, but no words came out. The silence following Captain Traoré's revelations was deafening, thick with disbelief, curiosity, and a creeping sense of scandal. The summit, meant to be a structured dialogue on justice and diplomacy, had turned into a live reckoning. Bondi finally reached for her microphone, her hands trembling just enough to be caught on the HD feed being streamed across major global networks. Her voice cracked slightly as she began. This is completely outrageous, she said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. I don't know where this man got these documents, but they are false. This is a smear campaign. I've worked my entire career upholding the law. To be ambushed like this, on international television, is beyond reckless. Her tone turned sharper, more indignant, as she scanned the crowd for an ally. But no one jumped to her defense. Instead, journalists were glued to their phones and laptops, already digging through the documents Traoré had released. Some were fact-checking on the fly, others furiously composing tweets and live updates. On several screens around the room, major outlets had already picked up the breaking news: Pam Bondi implicated in lobbying scandal involving African resource exploitation. She looked offstage and made eye contact with her assistant, who rushed forward and whispered urgently into her ear. Bondi's face went pale. Her eyes widened just enough for the cameras to catch it. The assistant handed her a sleek black tablet, and as Bondi scanned it, her expression shifted from denial to disbelief to panic. The emails and contracts were real. Her digital signature was clearly visible on multiple pages. There were records of private meetings with lobbying firms, strategy memos that referenced resource leverage in the Sahel region, and even a draft speech written for a West African president she had allegedly influenced, details too specific to be fabricated. I was consulting. These were legal, standard procedures. Nothing criminal, she said, her voice now trembling under the weight of the truth. But the audience wasn't convinced. The room was charged with the electricity of global scandal unfolding in real time. Murmurs turned to whispers, whispers to quiet conversations. Pam Bondi was no longer commanding the stage, she was the subject of it. A woman once known for her fierce rhetoric now looked unmoored, cornered by facts she couldn't spin away. Traoré, seated calmly nearby, remained silent. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply watched, letting the moment speak for itself. The moderator, visibly uncomfortable, finally tried to bring the session back to order. Let's remain respectful. Ms. Bondi, you will have time to respond in full. For now, we'll proceed with a brief break. As the cameras cut away and the summit was placed on temporary hold, Pam Bondi stood up abruptly, brushing past the moderator and storming toward the exit, flanked by her assistant and two members of her team. The mic, still clipped to her jacket, captured her muttering under her breath. Get legal on the phone. Now. We need to shut this down before it hits Washington. But it was already too late. Online, the screenshots were everywhere. The court of public opinion had begun deliberations, and Pam Bondi was no longer the prosecutor, she was the accused. Inside the secure backstage VIP lounge, the atmosphere was thick with urgency. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead and the low hum of distant voices from the main summit hall were drowned out by the tension that filled the room like smoke. Pam Bondi paced back and forth, her heels clacking sharply against the polished floor. Her face, flushed with frustration, was set in a tight grimace as she clutched the same black tablet from earlier. Her assistant followed her anxiously, murmuring updates and holding out a phone with a line waiting. Legal counsel was already on standby, and several missed calls from U.S. media outlets blinked on her lock screen. I want a full denial drafted now. And I want a press team to kill this story before it spreads any further, she barked, waving the tablet in the air. Where the hell is the counter-narrative? Her voice echoed in the room, drawing the attention of two other American delegates seated quietly near the far wall. They exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. One of her staffers hesitated before speaking. Ma'am, I think you should see this. He handed her another tablet, this one displaying a live feed from several major international news networks. CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, even Fox News were already running the headline across their lower thirds. Ibrahim Traoré drops document dump, bombshell lobbying scandal unfolds live. Analysts were already dissecting the leaks. The documents had been cross-referenced, verified, and partially translated within an hour. It was no longer speculation. It was confirmed. Pam scanned the coverage with growing horror. An overhead shot of the summit hall was followed by a freeze frame of her stunned expression during the live exposé. The optics were brutal. Her moment of speechless panic had become the story's defining image, memed, clipped, and circulated across every platform imaginable. We need to challenge the authentication of those files, she muttered, but her assistant interrupted. They've already been matched to archived emails. The Atlantic Consortium for Investigative Journalism confirmed them independently, and Reuters is reporting that a whistleblower within the firm you consulted with has come forward. Pam dropped into a chair, letting out a breathless laugh, equal parts disbelief and fury. Her carefully curated public persona, tough, strategic, morally firm, was unraveling faster than she could contain it. Meanwhile, in another corner of the lounge separated by a thin divider, Ibrahim Traoré calmly sipped from a glass of water. Surrounded by a small group of international reporters, he answered their questions with composure and clarity. His bodyguards stood nearby, watchful but relaxed. I did not come to Geneva to make enemies, he told the reporters. I came to speak truth. We will not be dismissed anymore. Our countries are not experiments. Our people are not resources to be auctioned off. And today, I merely showed what was already known, just hidden. His words echoed with quiet power. The journalist scribbled every sentence, sensing history in the making. Outside the VIP lounge, crowds had started to form near the building's press entrance. Protesters, activists, and curious onlookers gathered, holding up hastily printed signs. Africa is not for sale, we stand with Traoré, no more lobbying lies. Back inside, Bondi stood again, her jaw clenched. Her phone vibrated, another call, this time from a prominent U.S. senator. She declined it. Her mind raced. Damage control seemed impossible now. Her gaze shifted back toward the TV screens, where Traoré's calm image contrasted sharply with the panic consuming her own corner of the world. She knew, in that moment, that she had lost the narrative. This was no longer a legal crisis, it was a political reckoning. In the hours following the bombshell at the Geneva Summit, the world shifted. It wasn't gradual, it was swift, loud, and visible everywhere. Scene after scene played out like pieces of a global mosaic, all reflecting the same truth. Something had cracked open, and there would be no sealing it back up. In New York, massive LED news tickers scrolled across the buildings of Times Square. Traoré's document dump sends shockwaves through Western politics. Crowds stopped to stare at the clips playing on public screens, Traoré calmly revealing the evidence, Bondi's reaction frozen mid-sentence, her expression flickering between disbelief and dread. In coffee shops, cabs, and boardrooms, people watched. And rewatched the moment over and over again. In Washington, D.C., phones were ringing off the hook at the offices of several lobbying firms. Congressional aides huddled behind closed doors, whispering about who might be next. One senator canceled an afternoon press conference. Another issued a vague statement about transparency in foreign affairs, without naming Bondi at all. The White House press secretary was peppered with questions about whether Bondi had ever briefed federal officials on her international dealings. We are reviewing the documents, she said carefully. No further comment at this time. In Paris and London, journalists poured through the leaked files with forensic precision. International law scholars were invited onto primetime panels to discuss the implications. Was this just a scandal, or the start of a legal reckoning for how former officials profit from post-political careers at the expense of weaker nations? In Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso's capital, the response was electric. Thousands gathered in the streets. They chanted Traoré's name, waved national flags, and held up signs that read, "Respect our sovereignty, no more silence," and "We are not your minds." On building walls, artists began painting fresh murals, bold, defiant portraits of Captain Ibrahim Traoré with phrases like, "Le peuple s'est levé," "The people rise," and "Truth has no price." One mural, in particular, went viral. It showed Traoré in traditional dress, holding a thick folder labeled, "Justice," in one hand, and a mirror in the other, reflecting the faces of powerful Western officials. It was both a warning and a statement of clarity: Africa sees you now. Back in Florida, Pam Bondi had gone quiet. No press appearances. No tweets. Her legal team released a carefully worded statement citing politically motivated distortion, but it fell flat. Late-night shows tore it apart. Meme culture did the rest. Social media flooded with comparisons, satire, remix videos of her stunned summit moment set to dramatic music or auto-tuned into viral songs. She was no longer just a political figure, she was a cautionary tale. Influential African commentators spoke boldly on international platforms. "This is not just about one person," said a Nigerian journalist on BBC World News. "This is about an entire system that allows former government officials from the West to profit off the instability of nations they claim to help." Traoré may have just lit a fuse. Elsewhere, student protests broke out in several African universities. Their demand was clear: full audits of foreign contracts, public accountability, and a halt to any foreign deal not transparently negotiated. What had started as a dramatic moment at a summit had become a movement. And through it all, Traoré remained measured. He issued a short statement 2 days later: "The truth is not radical. It is simply not used to being heard." His approval rating soared at home. International observers began to speak of him as a new kind of African leader, unapologetically sovereign, digitally savvy, and unafraid of the global spotlight. As the dust settled, the Geneva Summit was remembered not for its original agenda, but for one singular event: the moment the world stopped, listened, and realized the rules were changing. Pam Bondi had come expecting to shape the conversation. Instead, she became its warning sign. And far away, under the golden light of a setting Sahel sun, Ibrahim Traoré stood on the steps of a government building, surrounded by his people, not as a guest, not as a pawn, but as a symbol of a continent standing taller than ever before.